What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Chess Giant, your boy Solo. Today's video, I'm going to be analyzing a game from the Evergreen YouTube chess channel. Guys, they're very good friends of mine, and they're making some great content. I'll leave a link to them in the description if you want to go check them out. But guys, today's game that we're going to be covering is between King Kai with the white pieces and the great Carlini playing as black. Now here, Kai as white started this thing off with b3, and as we're going to see, he's really trying to get into a hippopotamus attack/defense type game. Here he continues by fianchettoing both of his bishops, playing d3, e3, and then tucking those knights closely behind. Notice here how, playing the hippo, we don't really care what the opponent plays. Here, Carlini plays this move of a5, right? Trying to expand on the queen side of the board. Oftentimes in the hippo, if you do see a edge of the pawn move like a5, we could play a3, preparing to meet a4 with b4. But guys, in this case, obviously black has one pawn and two minor pieces attacking b4, so this really isn't going to do anything. a3 does nothing to stop this move of a4. So, okay, here we see Kai just play this move of a4 himself, really preventing this pawn from going anywhere. But now we see Carlini respond by playing rook b8, making it clear that he's trying to break this game open with b5, but Kai doesn't really care. He just continues to naturally develop his pieces with castling kingside, and here black plays b5. But okay, we now just capture back, and we play this move of h3, guys, a key move in the hippo. Some may be wondering, what on earth does this move do? It does a number of things, but I think one of the key ideas is to prevent an opponent's piece from ever coming to g4, like the knight. And on top of that, we're preparing potential g4 ideas ourselves, as well as tucking this knight over to a square like g3 later on. So, okay, here black plays this move of knight b4. I'm still a little bit confused on why this move was played. It's not a blunder, and sure, it does kind of lock up our pawn structure a little bit, especially the pawn on c2. If we play a move like c3, for example, knight takes d3 could be played, but at the same time, this move of knight b4 doesn't really threaten anything, right? So, okay, we see this move of knight c3 from Kai, attacking Carlini's rook, and now against this move of rook b8, we see, really this move of e4 from Kai. But guys, one thing I really appreciate about the hippo is that it gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of how we want to approach the game, right? Here white has ideas such as f4, just continuing to expand on the king side, really trying to get a grip on the dark squares, such as e5 and g5. Another idea that I personally really like is knight a4. Okay, I'm going to be referencing this move quite a bit in the rest of this video. A key idea, especially when black really, pushes their pawns up like crazy, it gives us squares. And the hippo, guys, if the opponent attacks us and we start trading off pawns, we're going to get some holes. We're going to get some weaknesses to place our minor pieces. And by playing knight a4, we're both activating our dark squared bishop and we're putting pressure on that pawn on c5. But here from Kai, we see this move of e4, expanding in the center, and this really gives Carlini a tough decision to make. Here he plays the move of bishop b7, but he was very smart to not play a move like d4, right? Now, I see this all the time in my own hippo games, especially in Bullet and Blitz. You play a move like e4 at some point, and the opponent tries to lock things down, and at first sight, it seems good. Our dark squared bishop is no longer active. But guys, at the same time, we can activate this bishop at a moment's notice with a move like bishop a3 or even bishop c1, rerouting it. And notice now that white has all the leverage here. What do I mean by this? Well, white here has plenty of moves they can play to improve the positioning of their pieces. Now, first off, this knight on a4 is very strong, putting pressure on c5. We have knight c4 ideas in the air as well. Talk about two monster knights. This knight on the c-file, putting pressure on that isolated pawn on a5. We could also play moves like f4, expanding, king h2, continue developing our pieces, and get an active game. On the flip side, black here, they've spent a ton of time pushing up their pawns, but what can they really do, right? Black could always try to trade off for the knight on a4, but in that case, we're simply just going to capture right back. This pawn on a5 ain't going nowhere, and this pawn on c5 ain't going anywhere either, because if you ever play c4, we're just going to take it right off the board. So black here is kind of just going to sit around, and here white is going to have that opportunity to really play it slow, improve the positioning of their pieces, and then strike at the right time. So again, d4 definitely not the way to go for black against this e4 option. Black was also smart not to take on e4, because here Kai would have had the option of taking with the c knight, putting pressure on that isolated pawn and activating the dark squared bishop. Here we have ideas such as bishop takes f6, whole idea being this bishop could potentially be distracted from that pawn on c5. We can always look at ideas like knight takes f6 as well. And look, if you ever want to take on e4 with your knight, we can simply capture back. We're attacking two isolated pawns in this position. We have queen g4 ideas ready to go. And guys, here I'm taking white any day of the week. So, okay, going back to this move of e4 from Kai, Carlini was smart not to push or capture, but simply hold the pawn structure in place by playing this move of bishop b7, in which case Kai plays this move of king h2, just tucking that king away to a very solid square. And against rook e8, there's quite a few different options white had here. I personally I like this idea of knight a4, putting pressure on c5 and activating this bishop. f4 is also a good option. But here we see this move of e5 from Kai, followed by f4, expanding on the king side. Carlini wastes no time in playing this move of f6, trying to chip away at the center. Notice if Kai did take on f6, this bishop would become very active. And all of a sudden in the center, Black would have 2 pawns and we'd only have 1. So if we do take on f6, bishop takes f6 is played. All of a sudden, Black has potentially e5 ideas ready to go. And I don't think that White has a very comfortable game there. So here we see this move of knight f3. Kai really just trying to hang on to that centralized pawn. And now Carlini capturing that thing off and then fighting for this open file with rook f8, bringing it right back. And I mean, here, White has, definitely a few different options. I think the computer likes this idea of bishop c1, trying to reroute it to f4, defending that pawn on e5. But here we see knight e2, and I think this is one of the key positions in which case the great Carlini, as great as he is, right? I mean, one of the best players in the world, really. I mean, if you know, you know. All that being said, he did miss this move of d4, right? Just expanding in the center of the board. And I know just a second ago I was saying d4 isn't good, but notice the difference here between a couple moves ago and now. Now, a couple moves ago, we were able to play knight a4 and put pressure on c5. Guys, in this position, our knight ain't going to a4 in really any future, right? I mean, I'm not seeing any way for this knight to maneuver itself over to that square of a4. And at the same time, I mean, we could try to get the knight on f3 over to c4. But guys, if we ever move this knight, this pawn on e5 is simply going to be captured off. And this is really the main idea of playing d4 now, is that this bishop no longer defends the pawn on e5. And all of a sudden, Black is threatening to simply capture off our knight and then simply win that pawn on e5. Now look, I mean, we can try to counteract it with a move like knight f4, attacking the pawn on e6, but Black just defends it with queen b6, and then again, ask White the question, okay, I want to take your knight and win the pawn on e5. What are you going to do about it? If we try to defend it, all of a sudden, a move like rook f5 is played, and here Carlini as Black would have had a very nice game. I'm not really seeing any future, in which case White can continue to hold on to this pawn on e5. But okay, I mean, against this move of knight e2, I mean, d4 definitely is a hard find. On top of that, guys, one thing I did want to mention is that with d4, we also have this idea of knight d5, right? Putting pressure on f4, just in case this knight ever comes to f4. And on top of that, looking at this very active square of e3, which would fork both our queen and our rook. So this move d4 really does have a ton of ideas behind it. But guys, instead of that move of d4, we instead see this move of bishop a6 from Carlini, probably trying to make a c4 break available in this position. Definitely not a blunder by any means. Here we see Kai respond with knight f4, putting pressure on e6, really trying to maneuver this knight into a more active spot. And against queen b6, we now see this idea of c4 from Kai. Now again, I do think Black needs to play a move here like d4, right? Trying to lock down this bishop and, even rerouting this bishop back to b7 later on. Instead, we see a little bit of a move order difference with this idea of bishop b7 and then playing the move of d4. But notice now, opposed to a few moves ago, White is a little bit more developed, right? And because of that, all of a sudden, we can more naturally defend the pawn on e5 by simply swinging this a rook right into the e file with rook a e1. I mean, look, you can take on f3 if you want, but this pawn's still going to be defended for the moment. And we now see this move of rook b d8 from Carlini. But now White is able to start expanding on the king side of the board with h4. Guys, this is one of my favorite ideas in the Hippo, eventually striking with a move like h4. Now, at first sight, it may seem as if White here is looking at ideas like knight g5, right? Putting pressure on e6. And because of this, Carlini continues with h6, right? Trying to prevent this knight from coming in. But guys, all of a sudden, we realized the main idea behind h4, and that wasn't to play knight g5, but actually this move of bishop h3. Guys, whenever you fianchetto a bishop, especially in a hippo-like position, you don't have to keep this bishop on g2 if the position locks down. Even in a position like this, where we have a wide open diagonal, why not just play h4 and put pressure on this very weak pawn on e6? So for you hippo players out there, whenever you're playing the hippo, especially in middle game type positions, even opening games, always be looking at h4 and bishop h3 ideas. In fact, in my recent tournament in the last game, round 6, you can go check it out. I think it's under the 2022 Pacific Coast Open playlist. I think it was around move 8, and I didn't even wait to play, a move like a4. I just played this move of bishop a3 very early, and put a ton of pressure on black. Obviously, I didn't give you any context for that position, but I'm just letting you know. I mean, these bishop a3 and bishop h3 ideas, depending on the situation, can be very dangerous. So, okay, when we play bishop h3, all of a sudden black here is just simply losing in this game. There's no way for black to hang on to the pawn on e6. And really here, black just continues by taking on f4, which is probably the best move from a practical standpoint that the great Carlini had, because if we play a move like knight takes e6, I mean, that is just absolutely disastrous for black. You know, knight takes e6, bishop takes e6 check is an idea as well. In fact, bishop takes e6 might be the move there, honestly, because if we take with the knight, you know, rook takes f3 ideas are available, but needless to say, I mean, here black takes on f4, and we simply take towards the center of the board with g takes back. All of a sudden, black really has no target, right, on e5. We see black continue with knight f6, trying to hang on to that pawn on e6, but we now see white not play rook g1, because we'd simply lose this knight, but instead rook f2, followed by rook g1, putting pressure on that pawn on g7. And now with the great Carlini continuing with knight h7. Now here Kai played a really nice and active attacking move, that being rook fg2, forming a battery ram and attacking that pawn on g7. Notice here, the great Carlini could have taken on f3, but it simply would have been losing, because we take on g7 with check. Whole idea being, if you play a move like king h8, we're going to get our piece back with, I mean, a rook on the 7th rank and a second one probably on its way. And guys, if we play a move like king f8, okay, I mean, we could take this knight on h7 and still be up material and have a one game, or we could just play this move of rook g8 with check and then win this game and move later, right? So, okay, I mean, white's just crushing that position. We see rook fg2. You know, black here, very smart to not just give up the pawn right in front of their king. So we see this move of bishop f8. And now Kai playing this move of rook f2. I think rook g3 may have been, you know, just a little bit more accurate. That way the knight is still defended, and we have two rooks going up against this pawn on g7. But guys, rook f2 also has its ideas as well. And in this position, we're looking to play moves like f5, right? Trying to break open the king side of the board even more, make that pawn on e6 a big target. And if we do play f5 and black captures back, we're going to get our bishop into the game, and all of a sudden we're going to have a passed pawn on the 5th rank ready to go. Here currently he takes this pawn on b3, but I mean, black can't really do this obviously without just giving up the pawn on e6 with check. And we now see this move of f5 from Kai. I mean, wiping out half of the 6th rank. Black is in big trouble here. Carlini continues with queen b6, trying to get some pieces back into the defensive action. But now a crushing move. Very nice tactical find from Kai. This move of queen captures on h6. Whole idea being, if Carlini did take back, we're simply going to have rook g8 with checkmate. So we don't see black capture back. Notice, by the way, black can't take on e6 because we wouldn't take back with the pawn, but we'd simply take back with the queen. So here we see this move of knight c7 by Kai again with a very nice find. Knight g5, simply threatening a mate in one, and black can't really stop it besides this move of g captures on h6, but this now gives something else up, and that is knight f7 with checkmate. Guys, this king has nowhere to go. Very nice attacking play by King Kai in the Hippopotamus Defense / attack. Very nice game. Thank you guys for watching today's video, and special thanks to everyone who has become a patron. My goal is to make this chess thing go full time, and y'all are helping me create better chess content and drop it more often. If you'd like to check out my playlist for all of my chess openings, click that link to the left. And if you want to learn more about the Hippopotamus Defense as a whole, click that playlist to the right. And as always, thanks for watching today's video. I appreciate you guys, and I'm wishing you guys a great day. Peace.